I watched my friend destroy her lying roommate's entire life with 3 screenshots after discovering she'd been secretly working while making my friend cover all the rent for 3 months. What's the most ruthless act of revenge you've ever seen? I was crashing on my friend Gia's couch when I watched her absolutely destroy her roommate's entire life with 3 screenshots and perfect timing. Gia was one of those people who couldn't say no to anyone even when it was obviously killing her. She worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse while Bailey supposedly worked in marketing from home, though I noticed Bailey spent most afternoons watching Netflix in her pajamas. When Bailey came crying to Gia in September saying she'd been laid off and couldn't make rent, Gia immediately offered to cover her half until she found something new, even though Gia was already eating ramen 5 nights a week to save money. I live in the next state, but when I'm in town, I stay on Gia's couch, and I always pay her a little rent to make up for that time. So I was paying her, but her actual roommate wasn't. The first month, Gia covered the full rent without complaint, and even bought extra groceries so Bailey wouldn't stress about food while job hunting. The second month, Bailey claimed she was close to getting an offer but needed more time, and Gia paid again while picking up extra night shifts that left her so exhausted, she fell asleep standing up in the kitchen once. By the third month, Gia's car started making this grinding noise that meant her brakes were basically gone, but she still handed over Bailey's rent money because Bailey swore she was waiting to hear back from final interviews. Gia finally worked up the courage to ask Bailey for just 1 month of rent back so she could fix her car before it became completely undrivable. She approached it so carefully, explaining how she'd been walking to work in the rain because she was scared to drive without proper brakes, and how she only needed enough for the repair, not even the full 3 months Bailey owed her. Bailey put on this whole performance about how devastated she was that she couldn't help, talking about how the job market was so brutal, and she was already borrowing from her parents just to survive. I was there on the couch when Bailey's boyfriend Craig came over that night, and Bailey was telling him how guilty she felt about Gia's car situation, while wearing a brand new designer jacket I'd never seen before. Craig actually offered to loan Gia the money himself, but Bailey quickly shut that down, saying they shouldn't enable Gia's poor financial planning, which made me want to throw something at her head. 3 days later, Gia's car completely died on the highway, and she had to get it towed to her apartment complex where it sat like a giant dead reminder of Bailey's selfishness. Gia was now taking 2 buses to get to 12-hour shifts at the hospital, adding 3 hours to her daily commute, while Bailey was supposedly doing virtual interviews from her bedroom. I started noticing packages arriving for Bailey almost daily from expensive online stores, and she'd always rush to grab them before Gia got home from work. One day I was working on my laptop in the living room, and Bailey left her bedroom door open during what she said was a yoga class, but was actually a work meeting. I heard her clearly discussing project deadlines with her team and complaining about her workload at the company she'd supposedly been fired from 3 months ago, and I immediately texted Gia what I'd overheard. Gia came home that night with this look I'd never seen before, like all the exhaustion had suddenly transformed into pure determination. She didn't confront Bailey directly, but instead asked to borrow her laptop to print some medical forms since Gia's printer was broken, and Bailey handed it over without thinking because she was distracted texting someone. Gia found Bailey's work email still logged in with hundreds of messages about ongoing projects dating back through all 3 months of supposed unemployment. But that wasn't even the worst part, because Gia also found Bailey's banking app open, showing regular direct deposits from her employer and Venmo transactions, sending money to someone named Mark almost daily. Gia took screenshots of everything, including one transaction labeled "Miss You Baby" with heart emojis sent to Mark just 2 days ago, and forwarded them all to herself before calmly returning the laptop. Gia sat on the couch next to me composing a text to Craig while Bailey was in the shower singing without a care in the world. She attached the screenshots of the employment emails, the direct deposits showing Bailey had been getting paid the entire time, and then the nuclear option, which was the Venmo transactions to Mark, who turned out to be Bailey's ex that she'd supposedly cut contact with after Craig caught them texting last year. Gia typed a message saying, "Bailey's been working this whole time and using the money you think she needs for rent to pay her ex Mark for what looks like more than just friendship," and hovered her finger over the send button. Right as she hit send, we heard Craig's phone ding from Bailey's bedroom. There was complete silence, and then we heard Bailey say, "Baby, what's wrong?" Gia and I sat dead still, waiting to hear what would happen, but we were so not ready for what happened next. Craig's voice exploded through Bailey's bedroom door like a bomb going off, demanding to know who the hell Mark was and why she'd been sending him money for months. The shower singing cut off mid-note, and we heard the water shut off so fast the pipes rattled in the walls. $300 last week with hearts and "Miss You Baby? Miss You Baby?" His voice cracked on the last word, and I could hear him pacing because Bailey's floor creaked in that one spot near her dresser. Bailey burst out of the bathroom in just a towel, her hair dripping water all over the hardwood floor, leaving wet footprints as she rushed toward Craig. "Baby, Mark is just a friend who needed help with rent. I swear to God he was going to be homeless." Her voice had that high-pitched panic I recognized from when she'd told Gia about losing her job, the same tone that should have been a warning. Craig was standing there with his phone in his hand, scrolling through months of Venmo transactions, his face getting redder with each swipe. "Help with rent doesn't need heart emojis, Bailey. It doesn't need 'can't wait to see you' or 'last night was amazing.'" He shoved the phone in her face, showing screenshot after screenshot that Gia had sent him. "And what's this about you discussing project deadlines at the job that supposedly fired you 3 months ago?" Bailey tried to grab the phone, but Craig pulled it back, holding it above his head where she couldn't reach even on her tiptoes. That's when Bailey started crying, but not real tears, those calculated drops she could produce on command. Okay, I kept my job, but I was too ashamed to tell anyone after I lied about being fired. My mom, she's sick, she needs help with medical bills, and I didn't know how to ask for help." She pressed her hands to her face like she was hiding her shame, but I could see her peeking through her fingers fingers to gauge if Craig was buying it. Craig wasn't even looking at her anymore, just reading from her work emails on his phone. Subject line, Cabo plans for next month. Can't wait to lay on the beach with a margarita while these suckers are stuck in the office. His voice was flat now, emotionless, which was somehow worse than the yelling. Gia was eating ramen every night to cover your rent while you were planning beach vacations. Bailey's towel was slipping and she had to grab it with one hand while reaching for Craig with the other. Someone hacked my laptop. They must have gotten into my email. But Craig just shook his head, still scrolling through evidence. I know your password, Bailey. Remember? You gave me permission to use your computer last week to print concert tickets. The Venmo history went back further than their relationship, showing payments to Mark from before Bailey even moved in with Gia. Craig's voice dropped to almost a whisper, and Gia and I had to lean forward on the couch to hear him. Were you ever really with me? Or was I just someone to take to restaurants while you sent the money to him? Bailey opened her mouth, but no sound came out, just this gasping like a fish out of water. Craig stormed out of the bedroom carrying his overnight bag that he always kept in Bailey's closet, the one with his gym clothes and extra scrubs for when he stayed over after his hospital shifts. Bailey chased after him, her towel barely staying on, water still dripping from her hair onto the carpet. Craig, please, let me explain. It's not what it looks like. But he was already at the front door, yanking it open so hard it bounced off the wall. Lose my number, Bailey. We're done. He slammed the door with enough force that Gia's nursing certificates on the wall shook and one actually fell, the glass cracking when it hit the floor. Bailey stood there dripping and shaking, then spun around to face us on the couch, her face twisted into something ugly. You went through my laptop? She was screaming at Gia, spit flying from her mouth. You had no right. That's invasion of privacy. That's illegal. Gia didn't even look up from her phone, just kept scrolling through something while Bailey raged. You handed it to me yourself, and you left everything logged in. That's not hacking. That's just stupid. Bailey took a step toward us, but her foot slipped on the water she'd dripped everywhere, and she had to catch herself on the wall. Gia finally looked up, her face completely calm. You have 30 days to pay back 3 months of rent plus utilities. That's $4,200. If you don't, I'm taking you to small claims court, and I have all the evidence I need. You can't afford a lawyer. Bailey laughed, but it sounded more like a sob. Gia turned her phone around, showing the small claims court website. Lawyers aren't even allowed in small claims court, Bailey. I wonder what Bailey's real game plan was here, working the whole time while watching her roommate struggle with broken brakes and 3-hour bus rides. The fact that she had Mark in the picture before Craig even entered the scene makes me curious about whether it's just you, me, and a judge looking at these screenshots. Bailey waved her phone around like she was going to throw it. I'll call the police. Identity theft. Hacking. You'll go to jail. But her hand was shaking so bad she almost dropped it. Gia pulled out her own phone, swiping through more screenshots she hadn't even sent to Craig yet. Here's your Instagram from last week, wearing a new Michael Kors bag while telling me you couldn't afford groceries. Here's your LinkedIn, showing you as currently employed. Here's your Uber receipts from nights you borrowed bus money from me. Each image made Bailey step back until she was pressed against the wall, her towel barely hanging on. Lying about employment to avoid paying rent? That's fraud, Bailey. Who do you think the police will arrest? Bailey's phone started buzzing nonstop with notifications. She looked down, and her face went white. Craig had already told their mutual friends everything, and her social media was exploding. You're a con artist? I can't believe you did this to Craig. Gia should sue you for everything. She tried to type responses, but her hands were shaking too bad to hit the right letters, and mascara was running down her face in black streams even though she hadn't been wearing any in the shower. Then Mark texted her, and I could see it from where I sat because she had her font size turned up huge. Why is Craig sending me screenshots and calling me a homewrecker? My girlfriend saw everything and she's packing her stuff. What did you do? Bailey tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. She tried again. Voicemail. Her breathing got faster and faster until she was basically hyperventilating. Without another word, Bailey ran to her room and we heard drawers slamming, hangers hitting the floor, things being thrown into bags. I need to get out of here before this gets worse, she was muttering to herself, loud enough for us to hear. Mark will let me stay. He has to. He loves me. Gia and I stayed on the couch, and for the first time in months, I saw Gia smile. Not a big smile, just this tiny lift at the corner of her mouth. Bailey came out with just one duffel bag and her car keys, her hair still wet and now frizzing in every direction. I'll be back for my stuff when you've both calmed down and realized how insane you're being. She tried to slam the door behind her, but it was already damaged from Craig and just bounced back open. We heard her car start and peel out of the parking lot, and the apartment felt like someone had opened all the windows after months of suffocating. Within an hour, Gia's phone was blowing up with notifications. Craig had posted the screenshots on Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. When you find out your girlfriend's been playing you for months while her roommate covers her rent and she sends the money to her ex. He tagged all their mutual friends, Bailey's co-workers he knew, even her cousin who worked at the same hospital as him. The comments started pouring in immediately, each one more brutal than the last. By the next morning, someone had forwarded Craig's post to Bailey's company's HR department with a message asking if they knew their employee was committing fraud. Bailey didn't know yet because she'd turned off her phone to avoid the social media disaster, but her professional life was about to implode, just like her personal one. Gia had gotten up early to work a shift, but she'd left her laptop open on the coffee table, and I could see the email notification from someone at Bailey's company, asking Gia if she wanted to provide a statement about the fraud. HR tried calling Bailey for an emergency meeting, but her phone was still off. They sent emails, texts, even called her emergency contact, which was still listed as Craig, who told them exactly where they could find her. The emails I could see got increasingly urgent. Please respond immediately. Your presence is required by noon. Failure to appear will be considered job abandonment. Bailey finally turned her phone back on around 11 that morning, and it practically exploded with notifications. Missed calls calls from work, from her parents, from numbers she didn't recognize. She tried calling HR back, but they said she needed to come in person immediately. No exceptions. I could hear the panic in her voice through the phone when she called Mark, begging him to let her stay at his place for a few hours after her meeting. Mark came home for lunch to find Bailey on his couch, still in yesterday's clothes, mascara smeared under her eyes. "What are you doing here? How did you even get in?" His voice was cold, nothing like the flirty Venmo messages. Bailey tried to explain about Craig and the screenshots, but Mark cut her off. "Is it true? Were you lying about being unemployed while I was sending you money thinking you needed help?" Bailey's silence told him everything. Mark's face went from confused to furious in seconds. "My girlfriend saw those screenshots. She's at her sister's right now deciding if she's leaving me. Because of you. Because I was stupid enough to believe you needed help." He grabbed Bailey's arm, not hard but firm, and started walking her toward the door. "You need to leave. Right now. She's coming over in an hour to talk, and if she finds you here, it's over for me." Bailey tried to beg, saying she had nowhere else to go, but Mark just pushed her out and locked the door behind her. I know because Bailey called Gia's phone by accident while trying to call her parents, and we heard the whole thing on speaker before she realized and hung up. Bailey's parents called Gia's apartment 20 minutes later, and I answered because Gia was in the shower. Her mom's voice was shaking. "Craig contacted us on Facebook. He sent us evidence. Is it true? Has Bailey been lying about losing her job?" I told her to ask Bailey herself, and her mom started crying. "She won't answer our calls. We're driving down now. We'll be there by tonight." I went with Gia to the courthouse the next day to file the small claims paperwork. She'd printed everything out at the hospital. Screenshots, bank records, text messages, all organized in a folder. The clerk's eyes widened as she flipped through it all. "This is very thorough," she said, stamping each page. The filing fee was $80, and I paid it because Gia's account was still recovering from months of covering double rent. Bailey showed up at the HR meeting that afternoon looking like she hadn't slept, wearing the same clothes from the day before. They already had everything printed out. The social media posts, the evidence of her lying about working from home, what they called time theft. The HR manager told her she was being terminated immediately for violating company policy about honesty and integrity. Security stood by her desk while she packed her things into a box, her coworkers watching from their cubicles. That evening, Bailey came back to the apartment, pounding on the door, begging Gia to drop the lawsuit. "Please, I've lost everything. My job, Craig. Mark won't even talk to me. Isn't that enough?" Gia spoke through the closed door, not even bothering with the chain. "You made your choices for 3 months while I ate ramen and walked to work. Now you can live with them." Bailey kept pounding, screaming that Gia had ruined her life over money that didn't even matter. "Insurance would have covered it if you'd been patient." But Gia just turned up the TV volume until Bailey's voice was drowned out. Eventually, we heard footsteps stomping away and a car door slam. The landlord called the next morning. He'd seen the social media posts and wanted to know the truth about Bailey's employment situation. When Gia confirmed Bailey had been lying about paying rent while actually employed, he said that was lease violation and fraud. "I'm starting eviction proceedings immediately. I don't want tenants like that in my building." Gia tried to say Bailey was leaving anyway, but he said he needed it on record for legal reasons. Bailey's credit cards started getting declined everywhere because Craig had called the companies to remove himself as an authorized user. The accounts got frozen pending investigation of the fraud claims. Bailey tried to buy gas and had to leave her car at the pump, walking away in shame while other customers stared. Someone who knew her from Craig's post took a picture and posted it online with "Karma's a bitch" as the caption. Bailey's parents arrived that evening with a U-Haul, ready to pack up their daughter's life. Her mom knocked on our door, apologizing to Gia with tears streaming down her face. "We didn't raise her to be like this. I don't know where we went wrong." Her dad just stood there silent, loading boxes while Bailey sat in their car, too ashamed or too angry to face us. The neighbors came out to watch, everyone knowing exactly why Bailey was leaving. Someone had printed out Craig's Facebook post and taped it to the mailboxes. Bailey's parents worked fast, throwing things in boxes without organizing, just wanting to get out. Within 2 hours, everything Bailey owned was in that truck, and they were driving away, Bailey in the back seat like a teenager who'd been grounded. A few days later, I was making breakfast when I heard a thud from the kitchen. Gia had collapsed, just dropped like someone had cut her strings. Her body hit the floor hard, and I barely caught her head before it smacked the tile. She was completely limp, her skin gray, breathing shallow. My hands shook as I called 911, trying to remember what they taught us about recovery position while begging her to wake up. The paramedics arrived in minutes, but it felt like hours. They checked her vitals and said it was severe exhaustion and dehydration, that her body had just shut down from months of stress and overwork. As they loaded her onto the stretcher, one of them said he'd seen this before in nurses who work too many doubles. The body can only take so much before it says enough. Bailey's life fell apart faster than a house of cards in a hurricane. Job, boyfriend, side guy, parents, home, all gone because she thought 3 fake screenshots could beat Gia's real folder of proof. I rode in the ambulance holding Gia's hand while she drifted in and out of consciousness, mumbling about needing to get to work. The paramedic told her work could wait, that she needed to rest. At the hospital, a nurse named Anita Graham recognized Gia immediately. "Oh, honey, what happened to you?" She took over Gia's care personally, making sure she got a private room even though the ER was packed. Anita hooked up the IV herself, adjusting the drip while talking softly to Gia about needing to take care of herself. "I heard what happened with your roommate," she said quietly. "That kind of betrayal takes a physical toll. Your body's been in fight mode for months." She stayed past her shift to make sure Gia was stable, bringing real food from the cafeteria instead of the standard patient meals. That evening, Gia finally spoke clearly, her voice hoarse. "Was destroying Bailey worth ending up here? Am I just as toxic as she was?" She looked so small in that hospital bed, like all the fight had drained out of her with the IV fluids. I told her she did what she had to do to survive, but we both knew that wasn't really an answer answer to her question. Anita came back with dinner, sitting on the edge of Gia's bed like they were old friends. I had a roommate in nursing school who stole my rent money for 3 months. I found out when we got evicted. She squeezed Gia's hand. I didn't fight back like you did. I just let it happen. And you know what? I still regret not standing up for myself. What you did wasn't toxic. It was necessary. The next morning, Gia was more alert, but somehow seemed emptier. I thought revenge would make me feel powerful, she said, picking at the hospital bracelet on her wrist. But I just feel exhausted and mean, like I became someone I don't recognize. Anita, who'd come in early to check on her, sat down with her own coffee and listened. That's normal, Anita said. Standing up for yourself after being a doormat feels wrong at first. Your brain's not used to you having boundaries, but that doesn't mean you did anything wrong. Bailey chose to lie. You just chose to stop enabling her. She made it sound so simple, but I could see Gia struggling to believe it. A court summons arrived at the hospital that afternoon for the small claims hearing in 2 weeks. Anita read it out loud since Gia's hands were still shaky from the exhaustion. You should see this through, Anita said. Not for revenge, but for closure. And for the money. You're going to have medical bills from this stay. Gia stared at the ceiling for a long time before deciding. I'll go. Not because I want to hurt her more, but because I need that money. My car's fixed, but now I have hospital bills. She created this situation. She signed the papers with a steady hand. No anger in her face, just tired determination. 2 weeks later, we sat in small claims court on those uncomfortable wooden benches. The judge reviewed all the evidence Gia had submitted. The screenshots, bank records, text messages. Bailey's chair at the defendant's table stayed empty. The judge looked at it, then at Gia, his expression getting harder as he read through everything. Mizzy Thompson has been properly served and chose not to appear, the judge said, adjusting his glasses. In 15 years on this bench, this is one of the clearest cases of roommate fraud I've seen. He held up the Venmo screenshots, shaking his head at the heart emojis and messages. Default judgment for the plaintiff in the full amount requested plus court costs. 3 weeks later, a certified letter arrived with a check from Bailey's parents for the full judgment amount. The note from her mother was brief. Please accept this payment in full. We ask only that you not pursue wage garnishment against our daughter. We are deeply sorry. Gia deposited it immediately, watching her account balance finally show something other than near zero. With the money, Gia got her car fully serviced. Not just the brakes, but everything the mechanic had been warning her about for months. He told her she was lucky she hadn't crashed driving it in that condition for so long. She sat in the driver's seat afterward, testing the brakes at every light, learning to trust the car again like she was learning to trust herself. Isabel Cheney moved in as the new roommate 3 weeks after Bailey left. Anita had recommended her from the hospital, someone reliable who actually had pay stubs and references. Isabel set up automatic rent payments before she even moved her first box in, saying she didn't want any confusion about money. She bought her own groceries and labeled them, respecting the clear boundaries Gia had established. The apartment slowly transformed with Isabel's presence. She brought plants that filled the windows, making the space feel alive again. She and Gia developed a respectful routine, morning coffee together but no forced conversation, each respecting the other's space. When Isabel asked to borrow milk one morning, Gia hesitated for just a second before saying yes. Isabel noticed and immediately offered to Venmo payment, but Gia shook her head. It's just milk, but thanks for asking first. 3 months later, Craig texted Gia from an unknown number. Thank you for showing me the truth. I'm in therapy now dealing with trust issues, but you saved me from marrying her. I heard she moved to Colorado with her parents. Gia read it twice, then simply replied, "You're welcome," before deleting the thread. Anita started inviting Gia out with other nurses after shifts. Gia went but left early at first, still learning how to be around people without giving too much of herself. But slowly she started staying longer, even laughing at stories about difficult patients. The walls she'd built were still there, but they had doors now. When I visited 6 months later, the apartment felt different. Isabel's plants everywhere, Anita cooking dinner, Gia actually laughing at something on TV. Not the exhausted, empty Gia from before Bailey, and not the cold, vengeful Gia from during the destruction. Someone new, someone who'd learned to protect herself without closing off completely. Isabel mentioned seeing Bailey's LinkedIn showing her in Colorado, seeking opportunities. Someone had commented asking if she was the same Bailey from the viral roommate fraud post. Gia just nodded and changed the subject. That chapter was closed. The apartment had become something sustainable. Isabel paid rent without drama. Anita brought friendship without obligation. The plants cleaned the air and made everything feel fresh. Gia had been promoted at work, making enough that she didn't need a roommate anymore, but she kept Isabel anyway. It's nice having someone around who doesn't need anything from me, she said. That evening, Gia made dinner for all of us. Just spaghetti with jar sauce, nothing fancy, but she was humming while she cooked, some tune I didn't recognize. It was the first time I'd heard her hum since before Bailey's lies started. The sound was quiet, but it filled the kitchen like proof that she was healing. Before I left the next morning, Gia hugged me properly. Not the stiff, quick hugs we'd been doing, but a real one. Thank you for staying through all of it, she whispered. Even when I went dark, I hugged her back, feeling how much healthier she was. No longer just bones and exhaustion. That's what friends do, I said, and felt her nod against my shoulder. We were different now. All of us changed by what happened, but we were okay. Different, but okay. Thanks for letting me wonder alongside you through all of this. Really loved exploring these moments together. Until we meet again, like the video, it helps more than you think.